Hello, everybody. This is the March 10th, rescheduled for March 3rd. A couple of you showed up on March 3rd. Sorry about that, but hope you were able to reschedule to come back here today, March 10th, with me, Leslie Nips, and Suzi Tucker, and Jane Peterson, who's settling herself in. And this is the faculty of the upcoming West Coast Constellations Intensive. So this is tea. Hold up your teacups or whiskey glasses or whatever you're drinking, water glasses. If you're wearing your PJs or your comfy sweater, just hope that you're comfortable taking care of yourself, enjoying yourself here today. We're going to do a little chat. We're going to hear from some of the faculty. We're going to actually do some constellation stuff together. Just little tasty stuff, and connect with you as much as we can. As I said, for those of you who are here early, we had 77 RSVPs for this webinar, which is awesome, but it means that we'll probably have 10 of you because that's how these RSVPs go. And if we have 77, that's awesome. A little bit of orientation. These days, most people know Zoom, but if you're new to Zoom, bottom left-hand side is the mute button. It's also your stop and start video button. It would be grand to see you, but it's not required by any means. And when it's time to maybe ask a question or something, there's a couple of ways to do that. The main way is using the chat. I will be trying to track that as we go along. If I miss it, just, raise your hand or something like that. But mostly we're just going to be sort of connecting with the faculty. Also in the upper right-hand corner, if you're on a computer, again, on tablets and phones, you might have to hunt for this a little bit. But in the upper right-hand corner, if you're on a computer, there's a nice little toggle from speaker view to gallery view. So if you want to see the speaker real big, you'll have it on speaker view. And if you want to see everybody, which is the way I like to do it, then toggle it on to gallery view. Chat is at the bottom of the screen, and you can see what people are saying on the right hand of the screen if you activate your chat function. And enjoy yourselves. So it's good to have you all. This is not the virus. This is Leslie's normal nose. I just have a nose like this, so no worries. So let's just in the spirit of what we're up to today. Again, my name is Leslie Nips. I'm the organizer of the West Coast Constellations Intensive. Been leading constellations and training here in the San Francisco Bay Area for a little over 10 years. I am a teacher, but I'm also present here with some of my teachers, Jane and Suzi. I consider myself a third generation constellation person in the larger profession. And I'm mostly emceeing us today. And hope to see a bunch of you in June, even amidst all the uncertainty that we're facing right now. So to start off with, I want to offer up a little constellation exercise, and then we will introduce Suzi and Jane and do a little constellation work with them as well. And we're getting hellos from Australia and Louisville. Oh, a couple from Australia, California, Canada, Montana, New York City. So feel free to put where you're calling in from in the chat function if you would enjoy doing that. So let's just take a second. Whatever you've interrupted today to get your technology together and yourself together to join us today. Return home to yourself. Notice how you're feeling today. You don't need to change it. As my Sufi business coach says, there's room for whatever we're feeling. And as those of us who've been around constellations for a while are used to doing, and those of you who may be new, this may be new, but imagine in front of you your ancestors, perhaps going up a hillside or a set of bleachers. At the bottom are your parents, 2, behind them their parents, 4, then 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. In less than 10 rows, you've got over 1,000 people in a line. And as you just, your eyes sort of gaze over these people, this motley crew, just get an impression of the happy ones and the sad ones, the lucky ones and the unlucky ones, the sinners and the saints, the poets and the engineers, the wise ones and the fools. Just notice them. Each one being exactly where they need to be for you to be here now, including the ones we might still feel a little cranky about. And then to set the tone for this little gathering, notice in any way that your consciousness does this, notice the ancestors of everybody else on the call. In my mind's eye, we're all in a big circle and the ancestors are crowded behind us. Just notice the ancestors of the people on the call and how each one had to be where they were in order for the others to be here now in this moment. And then I invite you to notice something that's really quite sweet, which is that right now, the other people on the call are noticing your ancestors with appreciation. Maybe easier appreciation than we sometimes have for our own. And let others appreciate your ancestors for you. These are the ones who will be with us for the whole call. I invite you to come on back. Thank you, everyone, for doing that. And for those of you who arrived during the little opening meditation, it's good to have you now. Do invite you to tell us where you're calling in from in the chat function. But for now, I want to turn it over to our faculty to just briefly introduce yourselves. Suzi, tell us who you are. Where are you? What's your favorite color? Just share a few things about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzi Tucker. It's so nice to see 17 people on the call. We're doing pretty well. I am here in Connecticut on a beautiful day. It's funny because, you know, we've caught each other at this strange moment in a certain way. And for me, this moment is, I've been doing constellations for many, many years. And I've been building. And I've had a trajectory that, if I look back, has a certain peculiar logic to it, a kind of Suzi logic to it, where I ran into brilliant people all along the way and just sort of said yes to them opening the door, and I walked through, and I was very, very fortunate. And in this moment, I am thinking about how I'm going to do my work in the next several months, maybe longer. And my first response was a little bit small p panic, not full out, but my trajectory was being interrupted. And as I'm sort of thinking about it and letting myself rest back a little bit, I'm getting in a little bit of contact with imagination, beginning to imagine that I can step up somehow and continue to do what's meaningful. And one of the things that I thought about was something Bert said in terms of forces beyond ourselves. The thing is not to be afraid, but to be respectful. And so I am feeling respectful of the coronavirus, and in a kind of strange collaboration. I'm not sure what it's going to look like over time, but pretty sure that all my training going back to 1998 and all of my encounters with Bert Hellinger and other brilliant teachers in this field have been very important in terms of letting myself imagine choosing again and recalibrating and reconfiguring what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So thank you for meeting me in this moment, and I'm very glad to meet you.
Thank you, Suzi. I feel more equipped already. Thank you. Jane, share about yourself, where you're calling from, what you're up to.
Sure, I'm calling in from a 5-acre farm to be in Aurora, Oregon, which is south of Portland, about 20 miles. It is an absolutely beautiful, not a cloud in the sky, cold, clear day here, which is why I'm totally washed out because I'm sitting in front of a window. So I can't do anything more about it. So that's that. I guess like Suzi, I mean, I ran into the work more than 20 years ago, and I was absolutely swept up by it. Went back to graduate school, got a PhD, still don't understand it. Tried. And so I've been in a long, I think of it as
excuse me, that's my dog.
Okay. I'd like to say I've been in a long dialogue with the work, a long conversation with this work, trying to really understand how it moves in me and other people. And I, like Suzi, have been gifted by many brilliant teachers crossing my path, and mostly saying yes. Sometimes I argued, but not to much effect. So I'm also in a place, I've had some life experiences, unforeseen life experiences this winter. So I also find myself in a liminal space, a space between, where the way forward isn't completely clear. And it's this place of really sitting with the unknown and waiting for things to emerge and tell me which way I want to go. So I'm also in a place of reconstructing, rebuilding identity, and this a theme of falling apart to come together is just like so resonant in so many ways, personally as well as what we see on the larger scale. So I'm really looking forward to being with you all, those of you who are coming, and really exploring what these spaces of unknown and not knowing and what emerges from them, and how that's a feature of life, how we can dance with that. So that's me.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for reminding us about the theme. Jane, Suzi, myself, and another person on our team, our program assistant, Christina Schonkweiler, who's not with us today, came up with this title, I don't know, last September or something like that, October, having no idea what March would look like. And yet I'm falling more and more in love with our title. It's feeling so resonant, both at the macro level of the coronavirus and so much that's going on in our culture right now, around the planet, but also in terms of personal stories. And so what I want to do now is invite the faculty to, I asked the same question on our last webinar in January, and I cannot imagine the answers are going to be the same now, 2 whole months, it sounds like 10 years later. Jane, would you be willing to just keep chatting a little bit on that theme and what's come to you around what the theme means to you personally, professionally, and specifically with respect to what constellations is uniquely able to bring to this falling apart to come together thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me personally, what's been falling apart are old expectations. The social boxes I've been living in. I'm now 63, so I'm old. I get to do things differently, right? So I think part of what's been falling apart for me is really looking at the expectations and constructs, the agreements that we have, that we build our close personal social worlds out of, and really questioning those, particularly in terms of, I don't know how long I'm going to be on this earth. And the question I've been sitting with is, what brings me joy? What brings me joy? Because I know that when I am really joyful, that is good for other people too, as well as me. That it's a good energy in the world or whatever. And when I look at some of the agreements and some of the things that I've done and agreed to, including this whole therapeutic frame, I've been looking at my relationship with my clients, like, what is the agreement? And does that bring me joy? And do I need to let that fall apart so that I can have joy? And then I look at the larger social constructs that we've made, the way we do work and money and give and take in our society. And I think, there needs to be a lot of things that fall apart so that we can find better and more human ways to be with each other that are more in tune with reality, with what makes people happy. More things don't make people happy after a certain point. What brings us health and happiness and wellness as human beings. And I think when the old structures can be loosened, can be questioned, can be seen, because these are the things that make the fabric of our daily life. We don't see them anymore. When we can actually call them to mind and see them, we can begin to question them. We can ask ourselves, what else could be here? How else could we do this? I'm also, our little farm here, we're devotees of permaculture, which some of you may know about, which is actually a way of doing agriculture in ways that are restorative and build soil and improve the land rather than degrade it. And I like that, a lot of the principles from permaculture, because they actually inspire me to think about what else and give me some frameworks to think about what could be better. And on a really large scale, I'm, a fan of Greenpeace and these folks that are, trying to save the environment. And what I see them create is conflict, rather than inviting the people in these companies, reminding them that they can do better. Like, we're all human beings, we're all on this planet. What if we decided not to look for what's wrong, but to look for what we could do, what we could improve, what we could do better? So someday I'll write that up, but I haven't had time right now. Send it into some of these groups and say, why don't you invite these guys to try to do better? Because they're human beings. And most of us being criticized or attacked become defensive. And what is it that allows us the safety and the space to explore alternatives? So I don't know if that's what you're asking for, Leslie, but those are some of my thoughts du jour. Maybe tomorrow will be different, but.
Yeah, and what you remind me of, the very first thing you said is that the falling apart in the context of our personal agreements. And when we hear that, we immediately think of Bert Hellinger's teachings, which is our loyalties. And so that falling apart isn't merely messy or uncomfortable, like a messy apartment, like, you know, it feels like breaking faith with something.
Right, and someone.
Yeah, and so wrestling with guilt, with righteousness, with the discomfort that comes with releasing old loyalties or even allowing them to be questioned is all part of this picture. So thank you for reminding me about that. That's a very rich part of what Bert Hellinger reminded us of around this. Suzi, let me turn it over to you. Falling apart to come together, and picking it up from what Jane was saying, or just what you're thinking right now.
Yeah, I may be very short in a way. I thought of, before the call, I thought of this idea, long ago in constellations, and Jane's talking about the contracts kind of gives some dimension for me to what I was thinking, which is that, falling apart for me has something to do with my focus and my certainty and all the safety of my intellect that I have built up over decades. And there is a way in which, when a very strong wind blows, or many, many strong winds blow, my focus becomes shaken. I don't choose to change it. And there is a way in which this falling apart to come together brings that up, that forces beyond me shake my focus, shake my certainty. I absolutely do not volunteer to do it. I prefer my small world of certainty, for sure, my small world of safety. But when it happens, I have to sort of look away. And Bert talked about this idea of seeing wide, right? And the focus becoming wide. And there is a way in which, as I begin to think about what would it be like if we fell apart and came back together, there's something about fitting into a wider space, the world fitting into my wider view, rather than like this and having to get rid of these folks or these ideas or these beliefs in order to let in these. As my wider view comes, I get to have many, many people in the periphery, many, many ideas in the periphery, and fight for less. So there's something about, Jane brought up Greenpeace. There's something about sort of a purer fight, right? But a less personal fight, a kind of fight that includes the broadest circle and not just me. So I don't know if I'm being clear, but for me, this idea of the narrow focus, being forced to release of the narrow focus and to return with a wider view. And if we could all do that, my gosh, if we could all be let into one another's periphery, I think that this is something to maybe not strive for, maybe to imagine that we can allow, so that we all have more mobility and we all have more freedom and we all can feel free to be kinder to one another because we have mobility. So this idea of focus is what comes to me right now.
I appreciate that, Susie, and it feels like a bit of a dovetailing with the opening exercise in which we not only focused on our own lineages, but felt the others noticing ours,
Mhm.
which is not usually what we're up to. We're
Right.
so focused on my great-grandfather who came from Poland in 1922, or
Right. Right.
thank you. So I want to invite people who have questions or thoughts. We got a couple of minutes for that, and then we're going to turn it over to Jane and Susie um, for some exercises. But if anyone has any questions, you can either type it in the chat or just kind of do this. We're a small enough group that, you know, we don't need to be very formal here with Zoom. And if you don't have a question, that's fine. Any questions or comments on Jane and Susie's sharing? Yes, it's going to be recorded and sent out to all the registrants. Yes. Jane or Susie, do you have additional thoughts on this?
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, can we edit out my dog?
No.
Dogs are part of life for sure. Yeah, I guess I mean the other reflection I have, I'm reflecting on Susie, so we're having a slow conversation here. Is that one of the things I've learned about that, you know, so sometimes life blows us around. We get buffeted by the winds of change, and we're forced to change our focus. But it's also possible to use the body as a doorway to do that intentionally. There are ways of actually working with your own posture. What is the habitual body armor, body pose that you take to life? And how can that be, how does that shape what you sense, perceive? And where are there opportunities for changing that? We have an activity we do in my trainings called open and close focus. One is about how you get the wide view, and one is about what your normal view is. And we play with the postures in the body and the armor that we take and how that shapes the way we perceive and the stories that are behind those that construct that. And so I'm just thinking about, you know, how the body and our stories and, you know, the world outside us, how these all dance together and interact to create who we think we are, who we believe we are, and yet how much room there really is there that we don't always see. So that's my sort of thought about that. Is there's lots of ways to play with it, and I think constellation work is one of those ways.
Yeah, I love that idea, Jane. You talked about movement last time, and I've been thinking a lot about the physicality. Sometimes I will change somebody's stance in a constellation, not because I want them to stand differently, but because it's not clear if I'm standing in one hip, and that's
Right.
my habit of being. It's not clear whether I'm telling my body to stand in one hip, or standing in one hip is telling me to be angry.
Or
Right?
somebody pushed you into that
Or
posture. There's somebody else there, right? Who's that in
Exactly.
response to? Yeah.
I love that. I love
Exactly.
that. It's funny. I do a exercise with facilitators mostly, in which I have people just look at each other, you know, with the parents behind them, and I don't go back so many generations, but enough that people have sort of this wide view. And then I give one of the two people a little index card with a diagnosis of some sort, loneliness or depression or whatever it may be. And they're not looking at it. They just hold the index card, and they just feel the difference between how they are being seen before and after. And the seer also feels the difference between that tunnel and the view. So I love that.
Right. The power of a label, huh? The power of words.
Yeah.
Well, and it works both ways, right? So there's the focusing that, in a sense, limits, and then there's the focusing that allows us to include the specific.
That's right.
the thing that, you know, that abortion or that death or that adoption that's been sort of glossed or not seen. So both ends, you know, there's the falling apart to come together. Falling apart can be problematic. Coming together can be problematic. Falling apart can be really rich and useful. Coming together can be really useful and rich. And part of what I love about constellations is the power of, oh, we can open up the view to see something larger, the larger frames, and then, oh, but we can go the other way too, and see the tender little tiny loss in 1932 that was so dear to that person. And we can work with that, what do we call that, that zoom?
We call it scale jumping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jumping scale, right, shifting scale. I had one of my faculty, Barnett Pearson's a wonderful human being. He used to say, what level of the system do you have in view? Where are you looking in here? And what does that, how does that shape what you see and what you think the world is? And he was very good at getting us to understand that we'd made some assumptions without being very direct.
We have a question here, which I'm going to share and see who would like to pick it up. I appreciate the from Priya. I appreciate the reminder to meet large forces with respect, and that's easy to do, at least for Priya, with the forces of the virus, but harder for me to do with the difficult reactions we're seeing. For instance, like mistreating Chinese. Any ideas about how we meet those behaviors, those reactions, also with respect? Which is a great question. Thank you, Priya.
Yeah. So I picked that up, and one of the things I was reminded of is the way that Bert approached, quote, victims and perpetrators, and the invitation that is part of constellation work to look with compassion on both sides, if you will, to look with compassion not only at the people who are being mistreated, which is very important for us to do, but also to look with compassion on those who are mistreated and see the fear and the, you know, what it is that is driving them. Because not until we understand all aspects of that will we know how to be respectful, and not until we understand really how the system is working would we know where is an appropriate place to stand in relationship to this. How could I, you know, in a generative way interact here or not? So it's so easy, again, using Suzi's metaphor of focus, for us to focus in on this, you know, person who's reacting, or the people who are being mistreated, and it's so easy to close in our focus there. And of course, you know, the clue is the righteousness that follows with that. And for us to actually really be able to show respect, we have to have some understanding. We have to have some sense of connection and withness with that other person in order to be able to really show respect. So that would be what comes to me for that.
And I think that's key, even just right at the beginning there of, you know, as soon as we can use the word fear-driven rather than wrong, we begin, we begin to open the space a little bit for a different way to even energetically interact with what's happening. I know, you know, I talk about this all the time for me, and different people have different ways, but usually most of my writing, much of which is sort of poetic, and some people, you know, might find it sweet, much of it begins with anger, right? And I actually begin with a little trick like that, like, oh, fear-driven. Bert used to say, you know, I imagine this person as a child at his mother's knee, right? For the most heinous people, like I see him as a 3-year-old, just to get the kind of bandwidth, just to get the heart width to look from, not to join. Actually, that's what it really is, not to join with anger meets anger, violence meets violence, hatred meets hatred. So for me, I try to write my way to the other side of it. And always the trick is finding that thing, like fear-driven. Oh, That's more spacious.
Right, that's more human. We all feel fear. We all feel anger.
Yeah, I know I'm an asshole when I'm afraid.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm a complete asshole when I'm afraid.
That's human.
Well, and also just the word respect is very interesting, because I think respect gets used in a few different ways. One is I respect you, which means I like something about you. It's a kind of liking or approving. But there's also a respect. I had a teacher used to say, "Old sailors respect the sea." That version of respect, and the sort of the bow to this is, or consent. And so the notion of, I can respect the larger forces that are way bigger than me, but we can also bring that to, like, my goodness, humans are being wacky right now. Okay.
Yes.
And it's not liking it or approving of it. It's just, oh, this is too. This is too. So a different sort of zhuzhing of the word respect for me can help us a little bit. And then just to turn this a little bit more into practice, we've got a very short amount of time together. But Suzi, you have a little piece of experience for us?
I have a little reading, which is...
As you always do, which makes us very happy.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. That's kind of you.
It's an experience.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to try this out on everybody. So I hope you don't mind being a little bit of a guinea pig here. Okay. I write to read as I was read to, is what this is called. I grew up in a single parent household as a single child, though my brother's ghostly presence hovered. No big deal compared to most of the world. A roof and food, education and friends, a loving mother. Still, uncertainty was breath. I didn't know what else might be lost, who else might be missing. Might I get lost? Would mom go missing? Anxiety took root in the expanse of that unknown. I didn't have a name for it then, and a slew of strange habits kept my mind distracted, my hands busy, my worry at bay. Except at night, when I could no longer keep my eyes open, but falling to sleep was the terrifying fall. On those nights, most nights, I would ask my mother to read to me. I can remember it even now. Skin, heart, story, logic, known. The characters came to me and escorted me into the darkness. They remained on guard when I could not. Most important, they took care of my mother. I drifted with them by my side as her voice became feathers, tails into dreams. The morning the sound of garbage trucks came to me like birds in the countryside. Morning is here. It is light again. My mother, my one and only, is banging the breakfast dishes, and I am late for school again. To this day, I write to read as I was read to. When someone tells me, that came just in time, or I wanted to find those words, or simply thank you, I think of these moments with my mother. I insist on reclaiming the kindred spirits who animated those stories so long ago, who told me they were just like me, that I was not alone. And I bow before the authors because someone thought to write my companions into being. And while uncertainty was part of the ecology of the tiny household that was mine and hers, there were other voices, soothing, wise, so beautifully other, just beyond the walls of that Washington Heights apartment. My mother thought to bring those voices to me, and I continue to try to bring them forward.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, Suzi. That's the focusing in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really beautiful. Thank you. Jane.
Yeah.
I understand you have an experience to share with us as well.
Well, it's interesting because Suzi and I are good at picking themes together.
It's true. We did last time.
We did that last time too. So my theme actually also has to do with words. And I've been thinking a lot about language and lately. In particular, English is a language of nouns. There are other languages that are built around verbs. Something like 70% of our words are nouns. There are languages that are the opposite of that. And what it means to have a world made up of things described in human terms. And so the little activity I have to do is just with how we use words. Sometimes they can be magnificent. They can be stories that guide us into the darkness and give us companionship when we are lonely or scared. So words are magic as far as I can tell. As human beings, we have this incredible magic called language, and we can make heaven and we can make hell out of it, or anything in between. So I want to just play a little bit with that. I want to invite you to think of someone in your life, perhaps somebody with whom you have some difficulty or things are not going swimmingly. On a scale of 1 to 10, pick a 3 to 5 for this. It's an internet webinar. Please don't pick the 10s. Pick something that matters, and maybe it's a neighbor, a coworker, or your child, or somebody close to you. And just as you call them to mind, notice the feeling in your body. Notice what you sense, how your physical response to that. And if they were to be in that space with you, where would they be in relationship to you? Would they be close, far? Would they be looking at you, seeing you? Would you be looking at them? Would you be able to touch them or not? And just see that relationship. Imagine that there are the two of you. How are you standing in relationship to each other? And if that positioning was itself a story, what story would that tell you? What words come to mind about the relationship the two of you have embodied? And just notice, not just your story told from your point of view, or their story told from their point of view, but the story of the relationship, the story of the positioning, the stances, and what that makes in the space between you. And then I'll loan you the magic wand from under my chair so you can have it. And if you could bring one word into this relationship that would begin to create more possibility. It could be joy or peace or understanding or respect. I don't know. And you are to bring that word into this relationship where each of you stand and let yourself feel that. How does that shift your stance? And since we can't change other people, but once we change, the relationship changes, how does that shift that image you have of the two of you? And just notice that those stories have real effects in the world. The stories we tell ourselves about our point of view, their point of view, who we are, who they are. It shapes literally how we stand in space with them. It shapes literally the expression on our face when we look at them, the relaxation or tension in our body when we see them or greet them. And knowing that you can change yourself, you can bring something in, and that will shift your stance, which will shift that relationship. What would you like to do? Often this means you have to give something up, like righteous indignation or anger. It means you have to like put something aside to try something new, but it's worth it just to play with and see what happens sometimes. So I invite you to harvest any learnings you have, any shifts that might have started, little movements that can become bigger. And just to take from this what's useful to you. Let it unfold as it will. And if there's something in your experience that you'd like to share, I always love to hear feedback. So I'll let you take your time.
Yes, if anyone has a share from either Jane or Suzi's little piece of work. Just I'll note that Jude said, "You teared me up, Suzi."
Mm-hmm.
But it's always nice to get a share or two, or a question, or a comment about either of those experiences, or the one in the very beginning as well. Yeah, Suzi.
Just I noticed when you mentioned putting a word aside to bring another word in, I had just before that actually brought in the new word beside the old word.
Oh, nice.
And it was nice how it loomed more, not larger, more contemporary. It's like something caught up in my head, like I was already there and just neglected to notice.
Nice.
So, nice.
Thank you. Yes, it's definitely constellation work. Like I say, the forms are not the work. We can do constellation work just with our voice. So thanks for that observation from Katrina.
Yeah, I'll just really appreciated that exercise, a powerful and easy way of helping ourselves with constellation work anytime and any place. Yes, how many facilitators here forget to use it for themselves?
Yeah, right on. We all do, yeah. Sure, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a really lovely, the second word was turning. And when you were so gently, like inviting us to take the next step in a way, it was like, I need to turn. I need to turn just a bit. And it was literally, I mean, these are the sort of movements that watching a group constellation teaches us, you know,
right.
Standing here rather than there matters for some reason. And so just me turning my body is what makes a difference. So thank you. That really, I could feel that in my body, that I'm a little turned away.
Yeah, nice. Well, to that end, you should read Carolyn's comment.
Yes, please.
It feels so beautifully with that. She says,
yeah, go ahead.
She says, I've done the ancestor exercise at the beginning before with the ancestors behind me. It felt different, more comfortable, safer to have them in front of me. Just that little change, right? Yeah. Interesting to notice and practice in different ways. She says, thank you.
Yeah. I know that's something, Jane, you have placed a lot of attention on. It's just like, let's just notice how it's you know, the arrangement of things.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of pattern. I mean, human beings and language are so patterned. Yeah. So it's easy to use that.
Other shares or questions, and we're happy to actually hear people's voices too. I'm delighted the chat is awesome. But if anyone just wanted to say a word or had a question before I shift gears here towards the end. I also just wanted to say to Suzi and her that, again, I love the specificity of the specific inheritance or handing on there. both with their mother and all the writers. And it just turned me to think about those little things. My version of that is probably food, as for so many of us,
Yeah.
cooking and food, and how it connects us so specifically to one person, but also to way more people.
Yeah, can I just say two quick
Please.
things there? One is that, you know, when people are facilitating and we see that the person who is actually not literally in the family, but was somehow important to the family. So I think that's what, you know, really gets me reclaiming the writers, that there is a way in which they have the importance of the governess or the coach, or, you know, those kinds of people. And then the other thing is that, you know, I see a lot in constellations, I hear a lot this line of when we look at mother, we look at father, we even look at the entire ancestry, and we look back, that we have the opportunity to take more than we were actually given. And that's such a generative, right? You know, right in the creativity, right in the generativeness. I'm going to take this assemblage, I'm going to take this alchemy, and I'm going to take more than I personally was given. So.
That is so yummy. I am stealing that one.
Yeah, right.
We can take even more than we were given. That's just incredible. And that's why, I mean, I use the word inheritance because it's a common shorthand that we have for this relationship. But I actually don't tend to think about this stuff as much as inheritance in the same way we think of inheriting blue eyes or color of hair and things like that. That it's mostly all stuff that we take, which means it's stuff that we can choose not to take as well. It's not just sort of forced on us. So thank you for that. So any other questions or comments here, my friends? Adding to the conversation. And I just noticed we just got a new person. I don't know which one it is, because when someone comes in, it arranges the whole screen. They don't just come in at the bottom of the screen. So I don't know which one is totally new, but we're glad you're here. We hope you didn't get the time completely wrong. And we will be sending out the recording. So shifting gears here for just a moment, I do want to remind you that we're all here by virtue of the West Coast Constellations Intensive, taking place June 10th to 14th, just outside of San Francisco, California, USA. And that the early bird continues on that through, I'm just wanting to put this in the, I'm putting the westcoastconstellations.com, the website right there in the chat. westcoastconstellations.com is the link. We continue to have the early bird through April 1st, which is $200 off. We have a lot of people gathered already who have signed up, and we expect a bunch more. It is an amazing, this is our 4th year. We get really great feedback about what a rich community experience this is. And people leave not only with having a really good time with the faculty, but with each other and with the community and with the location. Let's name the very visible elephant in the room, which is that none of us know what's going on around travel and all that stuff in the next few months. And at this point, we are going forward as planned, simply because there isn't really much else we can do until our local governments or the venue or the obvious state of things tells us we must not. And so we're going out into the unknown. And so if it's looking like a good fit for you, by all means, look at the website, look through it, check it out. And as soon as we make any decisions around anything, we'll put it up on the website. We are at this point crossing our fingers that June is going to be fine in Northern California. And you know, if we end up shifting early bird deadlines, and there may be things we shift, but right now we haven't shifted anything. We're just looking at the situation, communicating with the venue, and hoping you're at least considering it as a really good option for you in this June. For those of you who have never experienced an intensive format before, I like to think of conferences as buffets, fabulous buffets, and workshops with a particular person as being a rich meal with just that person. Intensives are a very peer-oriented experience in which you go very deeply together with all of the faculty. So yes, you experience all of the faculty in an extremely rich kind of a way. It's delightful. Suzi and Jane, anything you want to add to that, either details I missed or just a personalized version of what you love about intensives and why you'd encourage people to come? Jane, hold on, you're muted for some reason. I see you talking. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. I know that people make lifelong friends. It's a way of being with kindred spirits and kindred souls that is nourishing, just to be with people who are like you in some ways, and also different in good ways. So I think of it as like going to a well that has the most delicious, nourishing water in it, and being able to drink as deeply as you want.
Yes, I've noticed that too, and lifelong colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome.
And Suzi?
And I love the, the sort of implicit format of looking, I always say, looking into a room through different windows, you see different rooms, actually. And this is an opportunity to do that, both with our own experiences that we call issues, and with one another, that we bring the gift of ourselves to one another. And, by the end of that, I so enjoyed the immersion last year. And, by the end, I kind of looked around and I'd sort of forgotten who the faculty was.
I know that one, yeah. We're all teachers.
The other thing is that Jane, Suzi, and I really like each other,
yeah,
and get along well. And we're quite different facilitators, which is nice. You get really different styles. What we notice, what we see first, what we seem to attract from the field varies. And so that makes for really quite a rich experience, even as we love each other and are sad that we can't receive work from each other because we're too busy being faculty.
Too far apart, yeah.
So any concrete questions about that before we sign off? If anyone has like a logistical or detail-y question, I'm happy to answer that before we sign off here. Just raise your hand, or thanks to three if you're going to this. It's inspiring for me. Thank you, Jude. Thank you.
It's nice, Jude.
Yeah.
Judy.
And if your questions were not answered about the intensive, reach out to me, go to the website. We will answer all your questions. We can even get on the phone if we need to do that in order to answer your questions. We know it's a certain time. Ken's got his hand up. Excellent.
I have a quick question, and it is probably just logistical. When you're doing constellations and you have a number of, I guess you call yourself constellators.
Facilitators, yeah.
Facilitators. Do you each take turns doing a constellation? Do you work together with a group?
What an interesting idea. We could all co-facilitate. But no.
Yeah, I have stories about that one.
But no, there are different formats. There's whole group formats. There's separate workshops, but the main core of it is everybody is in a group more or less of peers of about 10 to 15 people, and the faculty rotate through.
Got it.
Yeah.
And,
so
and a bonus question. Are there particular people that you look for as far as participants? Is there any particular background or experience? Does it matter?
The genius of this format is that it serves both brand new people to very advanced people. There are times where we're all together, like a martial arts dojo, the white belts and the black belts all hanging out together and engaging the field. And there are times we come into our peer groups where we can focus in a way that we can only do with our peers. So anyone who's interested and finds themselves resonating is welcome.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you giving me the chance to ask those questions.
Yeah, yeah. And if what is a peer group? It's just a group of people with respect to constellations that are, I hate to say this, but are more or less at the same level. So sort of people who are brand new to I'm answering Priya's question. More or less new to constellations, have sort of a medium amount of exposure to constellations, and then facilitators and trainers are sort of the peer groups, generally speaking. Yeah, this is peers with respect to constellations, not with respect to car mechanics.
Yeah. It actually sounds very interesting and very
kind of a Montessori approach.
Montessori approach.
Right. That's great.
very good. Well,
Yeah, and do reach out if you have more questions.
I think you guys deserve each other.
Thank you for the compliment.
So thank you to all of you for coming. I want to release you into the obligations or duties or joys or free time of your day. And thank you for coming. And many, many blessings. Susie and Jane are going to stick around for a minute because we're going to chat.
Yep.
But goodbye to you all.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to unmute you all so you can all say goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.